The windshield wipers of Miguel Rodriguez's silver Honda Pilot fought a losing battle against the torrential downpour that had suddenly engulfed Interstate 10 just outside San Antonio. What had started as a perfect Saturday afternoon drive home from Emma's soccer tournament in Austin had transformed into a white-knuckle journey through one of Texas's infamous spring storms. Lightning split the darkened sky every few seconds, followed by thunder so powerful it seemed to shake the very foundation of the earth. "Dad, can you see anything?" asked Emma from the back seat, her voice barely audible over the drumming rain. On the roof, the 12-year-old pressed her face against the rain-streaked window, watching the ghostly shapes of other vehicles crawling along the highway at dangerously slow speeds. Her soccer cleats were still muddy from the championship game they'd won just hours earlier, but the celebration felt like a lifetime ago now. Miguel squinted through the chaos, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. Semi-trucks thundered past them at speeds that seemed impossible for the conditions, their massive wheels sending walls of water crashing over smaller vehicles. "I can barely make out the taillights ahead of us," he admitted, his usually calm voice tight with concentration. "Carmen, check the weather app again." His wife fumbled with her phone, the screen's glow illuminating her worried expression. "The radar shows this storm system stretching for another 40 miles, she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Miguel, maybe we should pull off at the next exit and wait it out." But Emma had stopped listening to her parents' conversation. Something had caught her attention through the passenger side window, a dark shape on the highway shoulder that didn't belong. At first, she thought it might be debris blown by the storm, but as they drew closer, the shape became more distinct, more familiar. "Dad!" Emma's scream pierced through the sound of rain and thunder. "Stop the car! Stop!" Miguel's foot instinctively moved toward the brake pedal, but the rational part of his mind resisted. Stopping on Interstate 10 in these conditions was suicide. Cars and trucks were barely maintaining control at reduced speeds, and visibility was near zero. "Emma, what's wrong? What did you see?" "There's a dog." Emma's voice cracked with emotion as she pressed both hands against the window. "Dad, there's a big dog lying on the side of the road, and I think it's hurt." Carmen turned in her seat, following her daughter's gaze through the rain-blurred glass. For a moment, she saw nothing but the gray curtain of the storm. Then, like a photograph developing in slow motion, she began to make out what Emma had spotted. On the narrow shoulder, between the guardrail and the rushing traffic, a large, dark-colored dog lay motionless on the wet asphalt. "Oh my God," Carmen whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "Miguel, she's right. There's definitely an animal there." Miguel's construction worker instincts kicked in the same survival awareness that had kept him safe on dangerous job sites. For 20 years, every fiber of his being screamed that stopping here was insanity. The shoulder was barely wide enough for a car, let alone safe enough for people to get out. One slip, one moment of poor visibility from an approaching driver, and his entire family could be killed. But Emma was already unbuckling her seatbelt. "We have to help it, Dad. We can't just leave it there to die. Emma, sit back down." "Miguel," commanded, his voice sharp with fear. "It's too dangerous. We'll call 911 and report it, but we cannot stop here." Lightning illuminated the highway for a split second, and in that moment of perfect clarity, all three members of the Rodriguez family saw the animal clearly. It was indeed a large dog, a German Shepherd by the looks of it, and it was wearing what appeared to be some kind of tactical vest or harness. The dog's head was raised slightly, as if it had heard their approaching vehicle, and even through the storm and distance, they could see its eyes reflecting their headlights. "Dad, look at what it's wearing." Emma's voice was urgent now, pleading. "That's not a regular dog collar. It looks like ... like a police vest or something." Miguel's heart sank as he processed what his daughter was saying. If this was a working dog, a canine officer or service animal, then someone was probably looking for it. Someone who cared about it. Someone who was probably desperate with worry. Carmen reached over and placed her hand on Miguel's arm. "Miguel," she said quietly, "that dog chose this spot to lie down. It's not moving toward the traffic. It's smart enough to stay as far from the road as possible. Maybe ... maybe it's waiting for help." Another 18-wheeler roared past them, its massive bulk creating a temporary wind tunnel that rocked their SUV. Miguel watched in horror as the truck's wake sent a spray of water directly over the spot where the dog lay. The animal didn't even flinch. "It's hurt bad, isn't it?" Emma asked, her voice now small and frightened. Miguel made a decision that would change their lives forever. He flipped on his hazard lights and began carefully maneuvering toward the shoulder. "Carmen, call 911 right now and tell them we're stopped on I-10 with an injured animal. Give them our exact mile marker. Emma, you stay in this car until I tell you it's safe." The moment their vehicle came to a complete stop, the gravity of their situation became clear. They were parked on a strip of asphalt, barely 6 feet wide, with guardrail on one side and death on the other. Every passing vehicle sent vibrations through the ground that Miguel could feel in his bones. The rain was coming down so hard, it stung like needles against his skin. But as Miguel approached the injured dog, all thoughts of danger faded away. The German Shepherd was magnificent, even in its weakened state, easily 90 pounds of muscle and intelligence, with a thick coat that would have been beautiful if not matted with blood and rain. The tactical vest was indeed professional grade, with patches and equipment that suggested this was no ordinary pet. The dog's eyes found Miguel's, and in that moment, a connection was formed that transcended species. Those piercing blue eyes held pain, yes, but also intelligence, dignity, and an unmistakable plea for help. The dog's breathing was labored and shallow, each breath a struggle. Miguel could see multiple wounds on the animal's body, and the way it lay suggested possible internal injuries. "Easy, boy," Miguel whispered, crouching down despite the dangerous proximity to traffic. "We're here to help you." The dog's tail made the faintest attempt at a wag. Emma had disobeyed her father's orders and was now standing beside him, tears mixing with rainwater on her face. "Dad, we have to save him. We can't let him die here alone." Miguel looked at his daughter, then back at the dying dog, and at the endless stream of traffic that showed no signs of slowing down despite their hazard lights. In that moment, he realized that sometimes being a parent meant making choices that defied logic, choices that put love and compassion above safety and common sense. "Carmen," he called back to the car, "we're bringing him with us." And that's when their real adventure began. The next few moments unfolded like a nightmare in slow motion. Miguel and Emma worked together to lift the massive German Shepherd, their hands slipping on his rain-soaked fur as semi-trucks continued to thunder past them at deadly speeds. Dog weighed at least 90 pounds, and his body was completely limp dead weight that seemed to grow heavier with each passing second. Miguel could feel the animal's ribs through his matted coat, each one pronounced in a way that suggested weeks of malnutrition. "Dad, he's so cold," Emma whispered as they struggled to maneuver the unconscious dog toward their SUV. Her small hands were already stained with blood from wounds they couldn't even see in the storm's chaos. "His body feels like ice." Miguel's construction-hardened muscles strained as he lifted the dog's hindquarters while Emma supported the head and shoulders. The animal's breathing was so shallow it was barely detectable, and a thin stream of blood trickled from his nose onto Emma's soccer jersey. For a terrifying moment, Miguel thought they were already too late, that they were risking their lives. to save a dog that was already gone. Carmen had transformed the back of their Honda Pilot into an emergency transport unit, throwing their tournament gear into the front seats and laying out every towel and blanket they had. "Hurry," she called out as another 18-wheeler approached, its headlights cutting through the rain like searchlights. "I can't see its turn signal. I don't know if it sees us." The truck roared past them with inches to spare, its horn blaring in anger or warning. The blast of wind and water from its wake nearly knocked Emma off her feet, but she held tight to the dog's head, refusing to let go. Miguel felt his heart stop as he watched his 12-year-old daughter risk her life for an animal they'd known. For less than 5 minutes, "Get in the car now," Miguel shouted, using the commanding voice that had kept construction crews safe for 2 decades. They managed to slide the dog into the cargo area just as another vehicle approached, this one weaving dangerously in the storm. Carmen was already on the phone with 911, but the connection kept cutting out due to the weather. "Yes, we have an injured police dog. No, wait. I don't know if it's actually police. It's wearing some kind of tactical vest." Static filled the line, then silence. Emma climbed into the back seat and immediately reached over to touch Theo. Dog's head. His eyes were open but unfocused, staring at something they couldn't see. "Mom, his breathing is getting worse. I can barely feel his heartbeat." Miguel threw the SUV into drive and pulled back onto the highway, his hands shaking with adrenaline. The storm seemed to be getting worse rather than better, and visibility was near zero. But now they had a dying animal in their car, and every second counted. "Carmen, try 911 again and find us the closest emergency vet. I don't care how far it is." As they drove, Emma kept up a constant stream of gentle talk, her voice barely audible over the storm. "It's okay, boy. You're safe now. We're going to get you help. Just hang on for us, okay? Just keep breathing." She stroked his head with careful fingers, avoiding the bloody patches where his fur was matted and torn. Carmen's fingers flew across her phone screen, searching for veterinary clinics while simultaneously trying to get through to emergency services. "There's an animal hospital in Seguin, about 20 minutes away, but I don't know if they're open. There's another one in New Braunfels that says 24 hours, but that's 30 minutes in good weather." "What about San Antonio?" Miguel asked, taking the next exit too fast and feeling their SUV slightly on the wet pavement. "There have to be emergency vets there." 45 minutes minimum in this storm," Carmen replied, her voice tight. "With stress." "Miguel, I don't think he has 45 minutes. As if responding to her words, the dog suddenly convulsed, his entire body going rigid for several seconds before going completely limp. Foam began to appear at the corners of his mouth, and his breathing became erratic long gaps between shallow gasps that made Emma's heart race with panic. "He's dying," Emma cried out, her composure finally breaking. "Mom, Dad, he's really dying right now." Miguel pressed the accelerator harder, pushing their SUV to dangerous speeds on the rain-slicked highway. The speedometer climbed past 80, then 90, as he wove between slower-moving traffic like a man possessed. His years of driving construction, vehicles in all-weather conditions were the only things keeping them on the road. There, Carmen pointed through the windshield at a blue sign emerging from the storm. "Emergency Animal Clinic of Seguin next exit." Miguel took the off-ramp. At 60 miles per hour, the SUV's tires protesting with a high-pitched squeal that cut through even the sound of the storm. The animal hospital was a standalone building in a small strip mall, its neon open sign barely visible through the rain. Most importantly, there were lights on inside. As they screeched into the parking lot, Miguel could see a woman in scrubs standing at the window. Someone had heard them coming. Carmen jumped out before the vehicle had completely stopped and ran toward the building, shouting, "We have an emergency. Injured dog, not breathing well." Dr. Sarah Kim burst through the clinic doors, took one look at the situation, and immediately understood the severity. She was a small woman in her 40s, but she moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had seen thousands of emergency cases. "Get him inside immediately," she commanded, grabbing a gurney from just inside the door. Miguel and Emma carefully transferred the unconscious dog from their SUV to the gurney, and Dr. Kim began her assessment before they'd even crossed the threshold into the clinic. Her hands moved quickly over the dog's body, checking vitals, examining wounds, and noting details that the family had missed in their panic. "How long has he been unconscious?" she asked, already moving toward an examination room equipped with monitors and IV stands. "We found him about 20 minutes ago," Miguel replied, his voice hoarse from shouting over the storm. "He was lying on the highway shoulder in the rain. We don't know how long he'd been there." Dr. Kim's expression grew more serious as she examined the dog under proper lighting. "This isn't just exposure and dehydration," she said grimly, her hands finding wounds and injuries that painted a disturbing picture. "This animal has been severely abused. Some of these injuries are weeks old, and they've been deliberately inflicted." Emma gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Someone hurt him on purpose?" "I'm afraid so," Dr. Kim replied, already preparing 4 lines and emergency medications. "But right now, our job is to stabilize him. He's in shock, severely dehydrated, and showing signs of internal bleeding. The next hour will tell us if we can save him." As the veterinarian worked with professional intensity, Emma found herself praying to a god she wasn't sure she believed in, bargaining with the universe to spare the life of a dog whose name she didn't even know. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the small clinic, a different kind of battle was just beginning, a fight for life that would test the limits of medical skill, family bonds, and the mysterious connection between humans and the animals they choose to call family. The Rodriguez family had no idea that they had just rescued far more than an abandoned dog. They had saved a hero, whose story would soon turn their quiet lives upside down. For 3 days, the Rodriguez family maintained a vigil at the emergency animal clinic that had become their second home. Miguel had called in sick to work something he hadn't done in over 5 years, while Carmen rearranged her nursing shifts to accommodate their constant presence at the dog's bedside. Emma had convinced her parents to let her skip school, arguing that she couldn't concentrate on algebra when a life hung in the balance just 20 minutes away. The German shepherd, whom they had begun calling Hero in the absence of his real name, had survived the critical first night through a combination of Dr. Kim's expertise and what she privately called pure stubborn will to live. The dog's vital signs had stabilized, but he remained unconscious, his body working overtime to heal from injuries that painted an increasingly disturbing picture of deliberate cruelty. Dr. Kim had discovered evidence of systematic abuse that made her 20 years of veterinary experience feel inadequate to process. Old fractures that had healed incorrectly, scars from what appeared to be electrical burns, malnutrition so severe it suggested months of deliberate starvation. Most troubling of all, traces of antifreeze in his blood, a poison commonly used by people who wanted to kill dogs slowly and painfully. Whoever did this to him didn't just want him gone. Dr. Kim had explained to the Rodriguez family on the second day, her usually steady voice trembling with anger. They wanted him to suffer. This level of systematic abuse, it's personal. Someone had a specific hatred for this particular dog. Emma had spent hours researching German Shepherd care on her laptop, positioned in the uncomfortable plastic chair beside Hero's kennel. She read to him from articles about police dogs and military working dogs, convinced that his tactical vest meant he had once been a protector of people. Her parents initially thought it was silly, but they couldn't argue with the results. Hero's Vital signs always seemed to improve when Emma was talking to him. On the morning of the fourth day, Dr. Kim made a discovery that changed everything they thought they knew about their rescued dog. She had been running routine checks when her handheld microchip scanner began beeping insistently as she passed it over Hero's shoulder area. "That's strange," she muttered, moving the scanner more systematically across the dog's body. "I checked for chips when he first came in, but maybe the swelling was interfering with the signal." Emma looked up from her homework, which she had reluctantly agreed to complete in the clinic waiting room. "What's a microchip?" "It's a tiny device inserted under a dog's skin," Dr. Kim explained, her brow furrowing as the scanner continued to beep. "It contains identification information owner, contact details, registration numbers, sometimes medical information. Most professional working dogs have them." She paused, staring at the scanner's display. "Emma, can you get your parents? I think you all need to see this." Miguel and Carmen rushed in from the parking lot where they had been discussing the growing financial burden of Hero's medical care. Their savings were nearly exhausted, but none of them could bear the thought of abandoning the dog who had already survived so much. Dr. Kim held up the scanner, her expression a mixture of confusion and excitement. The chip was embedded deeper than usual, probably to prevent easy detection, but I finally got a clear read. She paused dramatically. "This dog's registered name is Officer Ranger, badge number K9-47, Houston Police Department." The silence that followed was so complete that the only sound was the steady beep of Hero Ranger's heart monitor. Emma was the first to find her voice, barely managing a whisper. "He's a police dog?" "Not just any police dog," Dr. Kim continued, reading from her computer screen where she had pulled up the registration details. "According to this database, Officer Ranger is or was one of the most decorated K9 units in Texas, specialized in narcotics detection. His handler was Officer Jake Martinez, and ... Her voice trailed off as she read further. "What is it?" Carmen asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "Officer Ranger was reported stolen 6 months ago during a break-in at the Houston Police Department's K9 facility. There's an active Bolo B on the lookout order for him. The reward for information leading to his recovery is $50,000. Miguel sank into a chair, the weight of this revelation hitting him like a physical blow. Someone stole a police dog and then tried to kill him? Dr. Kim nodded grimly. "It looks that way. And according to this file, Officer Ranger wasn't just any narcotics dog. He was responsible for the largest drug seizure in Houston's history, over $10 million worth of cocaine found in a shipping container last year. Dogs like Ranger don't just get stolen randomly. Someone wanted him specifically." Emma stood up so quickly, her chair toppled over. "We have to call the police right now. Officer Martinez is probably worried sick about him." But Dr. Kim raised a hand to stop her. "I've already contacted Detective Maria Santos at HPD. She's on her way here now." "But Emma," her voice became gentle, "you need to understand what this means. Ranger isn't just a dog who needs a home anymore. He's evidence in a federal investigation. He's also a sworn officer of the law with a partner who never stopped looking for him." The implications hit the Rodriguez family like a tsunami. For 3 days, they had been planning Ranger's integration into their family life. Emma had already designed a sleeping area in her bedroom and researched the best food for German Shepherds recovering from trauma. Miguel had been pricing fencing for their backyard, and Carmen had been calling landlords about pet-friendly rentals since their current apartment didn't allow animals. "But he knows us now," Emma protested, her eyes filling with tears. "We saved him. We're the ones who stayed with him when he was dying. Doesn't that count for something?" Before anyone could answer, the clinic's front door chimed, and Detective Maria Santos walked in. She was a woman in her early 40s, with the no-nonsense bearing of someone who had seen too much of humanity's dark side. But her eyes softened immediately when she saw Ranger lying in his recovery kennel. "My God," she breathed, approaching slowly. 6 months we've been looking for him. 6 months of dead ends and false leads. She knelt beside the kennel, and something remarkable happened. Ranger's eyes opened for the first time since his rescue, and his tail managed a weak wag. "He recognizes law enforcement," Dr. Kim observed quietly. "Even in his weakened state, he knows you're police." Detective Santos turned to the Rodriguez family with an expression of profound gratitude mixed with professional concern. "I can't begin to thank you for what you've done, but I need you to understand the situation you've stumbled into. Ranger's theft wasn't random. It was orchestrated by a cartel that had lost millions because of his drug detection work. Intelligence suggests they didn't just want him gone. They wanted to send a message to other canine units." Emma felt her world crumbling. "Are you saying we can't keep him?" "I'm saying that Ranger's story is far from over," Detective Santos replied carefully. "The people who did this to him are still out there. They think he's dead, which has been our only advantage. But now that he's alive—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Now that he's alive, both he and your family could be in danger." Miguel stood up, his protective instincts fully engaged. "What kind of danger?" Detective Santos met his eyes with the gravity of someone delivering a terminal diagnosis. "The kind that doesn't end until everyone involved is either dead or in federal prison. The kind that means your quiet family life is about to become very complicated." Outside the clinic windows, storm clouds were gathering again, and Emma couldn't shake the feeling that the real storm was just beginning. Detective Santos had warned them their lives were about to change, but the Rodriguez family could never have imagined how quickly and terrifyingly that transformation would begin. It started with small things, things that could easily be dismissed as coincidence or paranoia, things that, in hindsight, should have sent them running for protection immediately. The first incident occurred just 12 hours after they brought Ranger home from the clinic. Miguel discovered their car's tires had been slashed during the night, all 4 of them cut with surgical precision that suggested professional work rather than random vandalism. The cuts were clean, deliberate, and positioned in a way that would cause catastrophic failure if the car had been driven at highway speeds. "Probably just neighborhood kids," Miguel had muttered, though something in his gut told him otherwise. He called their insurance company and arranged for a tow truck, trying to ignore Carmen's worried glances as she watched him examine the damaged tires. The cuts were too precise, too purposeful for teenagers with pocket knives. Meanwhile, was experiencing her own unsettling discovery. Ranger had been prescribed a strict regimen of medications and physical therapy exercises, and she had thrown herself into his care with the dedication of a professional handler. But as she worked with him in their small apartment, she began to notice things that made her skin crawl with unease. The dog's training was unlike anything she had expected from her research. Ranger didn't just know basic commands, he responded to hand signals she had never seen before, tactical gestures that seemed to activate different aspects of his personality. When she unconsciously pointed toward the window while talking to him, Ranger immediately moved to that position and began what could only be described as a surveillance stance, his body alert and his eyes scanning the street below. "Dad," Emma called quietly. "Come look at this." Miguel approached cautiously. Over the past week, he had developed an enormous respect for Ranger's intelligence, but he was also acutely aware that this was a trained police dog with capabilities they didn't fully understand. "What is it, Mia?" Emma demonstrated the hand signal again, and Ranger immediately repeated his response, moving to the window, positioning his body to remain hidden while maintaining visual contact with the street, and emitting a low, almost inaudible growl that seemed to indicate he had detected something troubling. "He's watching someone," Emma whispered, her voice tight with fear. "Dad, I think there's someone out there watching us." Miguel moved to the window and peered through the blinds. At first, he saw nothing unusual, just the normal afternoon activity of their quiet San Antonio neighborhood. Children playing, neighbors walking dogs, a few parked cars that belonged to residents he recognized. But then his eyes settled on a black sedan parked across the street that he had never seen before. The car was occupied. Miguel could make out the silhouette of at least one person in the driver's seat, possibly more in the back. The vehicle had been positioned to provide a clear view of their apartment building's entrance, and something about its placement felt distinctly professional. This wasn't someone visiting neighbors or waiting for a friend. This was surveillance. Carmen emerged from the kitchen, where she had been preparing Ranger's special diet meal, and immediately sensed the tension in the room. "What's wrong?" she asked, though she was already moving toward the window to see for herself. "Don't make it obvious," Miguel warned quietly. "But there's a car across the street that's been there too long, and Ranger seems to think they're watching us." As if summoned by their conversation, Carmen's phone rang. The caller ID showed unknown number, which she normally would have ignored, but given the circumstances, she felt compelled to answer. "Hello?" she said cautiously. The voice on the other end was electronically distorted, clearly being run through some kind of voice modification software. But the message was crystal clear. "You have something that doesn't belong to you. Give it back, and your family stays safe. Keep it, and you'll regret the day you decided to play hero." The line went dead. Carmen's face had gone completely white, and her hands were shaking as she lowered the phone. "Miguel," she whispered, "someone just threatened our family." Before Miguel could respond, Ranger suddenly exploded into action. The dog launched himself toward the front door with a ferocity that none of them had seen before, his bark transforming from the gentle sounds they had grown accustomed to into something primal and terrifying. His hackles were raised, his teeth bared, and every muscle in his body was coiled for attack. Miguel rushed to the window and saw the black sedan pulling away from the curb with deliberate casualness, as if the occupants had accomplished exactly what they came to do. The license plate was obscured, and the windows were too heavily tinted to see inside. But the message was unmistakable. "We know where you live. We know you have the dog. We can get to you anytime we want." Emma had instinctively moved closer to Ranger, and the dog immediately positioned himself between her and the door, his protective instincts overriding even his recovery needs. Despite his recent trauma and ongoing medical treatment, Ranger was ready to fight to the death to protect the family that had saved him. "We need to call Detective Santos," Carmen said, her voice steadier now that the immediate threat had passed. "This is exactly what she warned us about." But Miguel was already thinking several steps ahead, his construction site survival instincts kicking into overdrive. "We need to get out of this apartment. Tonight. If they know where we live, if they're watching us, then we're sitting ducks." Here, Detective Santos arrived within 30 minutes of their call, accompanied by 2 patrol officers and a K-9 unit specialist named Officer Jake Martinez, Ranger's original handler. The reunion between dog and handler was emotional but complicated. Ranger clearly remembered Jake and responded to his commands, but he kept looking back at Emma, his loyalty now divided between his professional partner and the family that had nursed him back to life. The voice modification suggests professional equipment, Detective Santos explained as she reviewed the situation. The surveillance vehicle, the precise tire cutting, the timing of the threat. This isn't random criminal activity. This is organized, well-funded, and specifically targeted at recovering Ranger. Officer Martinez knelt beside his former partner, running expert hands over the dog's body to assess his condition. He's lost at least 20 pounds, but his muscle memory is intact. His response time is still excellent, and his protective instincts are stronger than ever. He looked up at the Rodriguez family with a mixture of gratitude and concern. You've done an incredible job with his recovery, but you need to understand Ranger isn't just evidence in a drug case anymore. He's become a symbol. The cartel that took him sees him as a personal enemy who cost them millions of dollars. Emma felt tears building in her eyes. So what are you saying? That we can't keep him safe? I'm saying that keeping him safe is going to require resources and expertise that your family doesn't have, Jake replied gently. But I'm also saying that Ranger has clearly chosen to protect you, which means we need to find a way to protect all of you. Detective Santos was already making calls, arranging for protective surveillance and safe house options. But as she worked, Miguel noticed something that made his blood run cold. Through the window, he could see not one, but 3 different vehicles parked at strategic positions around their building. The watchers had multiplied, and they were no longer bothering to hide their presence. Detective, Miguel interrupted quietly, I think we're about to have bigger problems. Outside, the sun was setting, and with the darkness came the growing certainty that the Rodriguez family's quiet life was officially over. They had saved a hero, but in doing so, they had painted targets on their own backs. The real question now wasn't whether they could keep Ranger, it was whether any of them would survive long enough to make that choice. Ranger seemed to sense the mounting danger. He moved to the center of the room where he could see all entrances, his body tense and ready. Whatever was coming next, the dog who had survived 6 months of torture and attempted murder was prepared to fight one more battle. This time, he wouldn't be fighting alone. The attack came at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday evening when the Rodriguez family had finally begun to believe they might be safe. Detective Santos had arranged for protective surveillance, and Officer Martinez had been staying in a patrol car outside. Their temporary safe house, a modest rental, home in a quiet suburb of New Braunfels that the police department used for witness protection. Emma had just finished helping Ranger with his evening physical therapy exercises, and the family was settling into what had become their new normal. Constant vigilance wrapped in the pretense of ordinary life. Miguel was reviewing job applications. On his laptop, he had been forced to quit his construction job when the threats escalated, when Ranger suddenly went rigid. The dog's transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. One moment he was lying peacefully beside Emma on the couch. The next, he was standing at full alert, every muscle in his powerful body coiled like a spring ready to explode. His ears were pinned forward, his nose twitching as he processed scents and sounds that human senses couldn't detect. "What is it, boy?" Emma whispered, though she had learned to trust Ranger's instincts completely. Over the past 2 weeks, the dog had alerted them to everything from pizza delivery drivers to meter readers, his protective software running constant background checks on their environment. Ranger moved to the front window with the fluid grace of a predator, positioning himself where he could see the street while remaining hidden behind the curtains. His breathing had changed deeper, more controlled, the way Emma imagined a soldier might breathe before battle. Then came the growl, low and continuous, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards and into their bones. Carmen emerged from the kitchen where she had been preparing Ranger's medication, took one look at the dog's posture, and immediately understood they were in imminent danger. "Miguel," she called quietly, "we need to call Detective Santos right now." But Miguel was already moving toward the window, keeping low and staying in the shadows as Ranger had somehow taught him to do. What he saw through the blinds made his blood freeze in his veins. 3 black SUVs were positioning themselves around their safe house with military precision, one blocking the front driveway, one covering the back alley, and one positioned to control the side street. These weren't the subtle surveillance vehicles they had grown accustomed to. These were assault vehicles with darkly tinted windows, and a kind of aggressive stance that meant business was about to get deadly. "Carmen, get Emma into the back bedroom right now," Miguel commanded, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had suddenly realized that all their preparations had been inadequate. "Stay away from windows and get on the floor." Emma started to protest. She had become Ranger's primary caretaker and couldn't bear the thought of leaving him, but Ranger made the decision for her. The dog moved between Emma and the front of the house, gently but firmly herding her toward the hallway, with a kind of protective instinct that overrode all other considerations. Carmen was frantically dialing Detective Santos when the front door exploded inward with a tremendous crash that shook the entire house. The first man through the door was massive, wearing tactical gear and carrying an assault rifle with the casual confidence of someone who had done this many times before. His face was covered by a ski mask, but his eyes were visible, cold, professional, and completely without mercy. "Where's the dog?" he demanded in accented English, his weapon sweeping the room as two more armed men filed in behind him. "Give. Use the dog, and nobody has to die tonight." Miguel stepped forward, placing himself between the intruders and his family, his hands raised, but his stance defiant. "We don't know what you're talking about." The leader's laugh was harsh and utterly without humor. Miguel Rodriguez, construction foreman, married to Carmen Rodriguez, registered nurse, father to Emma Rodriguez, 7th grader at Roosevelt Middle School. "We know everything about you. We know you rescued a police dog on Interstate 10 3 weeks ago. We know you've been hiding him here. We know Detective Santos thinks this house is secret." He paused, enjoying Miguel's obvious shock. "Nothing is secret from us." That's when Ranger made his move. The German Shepherd had been waiting for the perfect moment, using the men's focus on Miguel as an opportunity to position himself for maximum tactical advantage. With explosive power that defied his recent injuries, Ranger launched himself through the air like a guided missile, hitting the lead intruder center mass and driving him backward into his companions. The impact was devastating. 90 pounds of highly trained police dog moving at full speed was like being hit by a furry freight train. The leader's rifle went flying as Ranger's jaws locked onto his arm, and the man's screams filled the small house as he discovered firsthand why German Shepherds were chosen for police work. Chaos erupted. The second intruder tried to bring his weapon to bear on Ranger, but Miguel tackled him from the side, using 20 years of construction site strength to drive the man into the wall with bone-crushing force. The third man was trying to help his leader break free from Ranger's relentless attack when Emma appeared in the hallway, not cowering in the back bedroom as her parents had ordered, but armed with a baseball bat and a fury that surprised everyone, including herself. "Get away from my dog," she screamed, swinging the aluminum bat with surprising accuracy and connecting solidly with the third intruder's knee. The man went down hard, cursing in rapid Spanish as he clutched his injured leg. Carmen had managed to get through to 911, and her nursing training kicked in as she began providing a rapid-fire description of their situation. Home invasion in progress. 3 armed men. Shots may be fired. We need immediate backup at... The sound of sirens in the distance suggested that Officer Martinez had already called for reinforcements, but the intruders weren't finished yet. The leader, bleeding heavily from Ranger's attack, but still dangerous, pulled a backup pistol from his vest and aimed it directly at Emma. "Call off the dog, or the girl dies," he snarled, blood streaming down his arm where Ranger's teeth had found their mark. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. Miguel could see the man's finger tightening on the trigger. Emma stood frozen, the baseball bat suddenly feeling inadequate against professional firepower. Carmen was screaming something, but the words seemed to come from very far away. But Ranger had been trained for exactly this scenario. Instead of backing down, the dog did something that none of the intruders expected. He released the leaders. Arm and immediately pivoted to place his body between Emma and the gun. The movement was so fast, so perfectly executed, that it created a split second of confusion among the attackers. That split second was all Officer Martinez needed. The front door, which had been hanging by its hinges since the initial assault, exploded inward again as the K-9 officer and 2 patrol officers burst into the house with weapons drawn and tactical lights blazing. "Police, drop your weapons!" Martinez shouted, his service pistol trained on the nearest intruder. The gunfight that followed lasted less than 30 seconds, but felt like an eternity. The intruders, caught between Ranger's continued attacks and police gunfire, tried to fight their way out, but were hopelessly outmatched. When the shooting stopped, 2 of the attackers were down, and the third was surrendering with his hands raised high above his head. Miguel gathered his family in the hallway, checking frantically for injuries, while Ranger paced the perimeter like a guardian angel with fangs. Emma was shaking but unhurt. Carmen had a minor cut from flying glass, and Miguel himself had somehow escaped without a scratch. But as the adrenaline began to fade, and the reality of what had just happened settled in, one thing became crystal clear. This was just the beginning. The cartel had found them once, and they would find them again. Ranger had saved their lives tonight, but the price of that salvation was becoming higher than any of them had imagined. Detective Santos arrived as paramedics were treating the wounded attackers, her face grim with the knowledge that everything had just changed. "We can't keep you safe here anymore," she told the Rodriguez family bluntly. This was a professional hit squad, and they came very close to succeeding. The people behind this have resources we can't match with local law enforcement. Emma knelt beside Ranger, who was finally beginning to calm down, his protective duties temporarily complete. The dog's eyes met hers, and in that moment she understood something that broke her heart. Ranger would never be safe as long as he was with them, and they would never be safe as long as they had him. The most painful choice of their lives was approaching, and there would be no good options. The federal safe house in Austin looked like a fortress designed by someone who understood that privacy and protection sometimes required sacrificing every comfort of normal life. High walls topped with razor wire surrounded a nondescript building. That could have been a small office complex or a medical facility. Inside, bulletproof windows looked out onto carefully manicured grounds that were monitored by security cameras every hour of every day. It was the kind of place where witnesses disappeared until they could testify, where protected families waited for new identities, where lives were rebuilt from the ashes of old ones. The Rodriguez family had been living there for 6 days, and Emma felt like she was slowly going insane. Ranger seemed to understand their predicament better than any of them. The dog had explored every inch of their assigned quarters' 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and a living area that felt more like a doctor's waiting room than a home. He had memorized the patrol schedules of the federal marshals who guarded them. He had identified every entrance, every exit, every potential threat vector with the methodical precision of a professional who had done this kind of security assessment hundreds of times before. But most heartbreaking of all, Ranger had begun to withdraw from the family that had saved his life. Emma noticed it first, the way he no longer slept at the foot of her bed, choosing instead to position himself by the door where he could monitor. The hallway, the way he no longer sought out her attention for the gentle head scratches he had grown to love. The way his eyes had taken on a distant, professional quality that reminded her too much of the tactical vest they had found him wearing. "He knows," Emma said quietly, as she sat in the sterile living room, watching Ranger conduct his evening security patrol. "He knows we can't keep him. Miguel looked up from the stack of legal documents he had been reviewing. Witness protection agreements, testimony schedules, and relocation options that would give them new names in a new city far from Texas. Emma, we haven't made any decisions yet. But they all knew that wasn't true. The decision was being made for them by forces beyond their control, by federal agents who spoke in terms of acceptable risk levels and operational security, by cartel leaders who had already proven they could find anyone, anywhere, anytime they wanted to, by the simple, brutal mathematics of a situation where keeping the dog they loved would eventually get them all killed. Agent Patricia Hoffman entered the room with the quiet authority of someone who had delivered impossible news to desperate families, more times than she cared to count. She was accompanied by Officer Jake Martinez, whose presence immediately caused Ranger to snap to attention in a way that broke Emma's heart all over again. We've completed our threat assessment. Agent Hoffman began without preamble. The cartel. That took Ranger has international resources, unlimited funding, and a demonstrated willingness to kill entire families to achieve their objectives. They've already found you twice, despite our best security measures. Local law enforcement cannot provide adequate protection for the long term. Jake knelt beside Ranger, and the dog's transformation was immediate and devastating to watch. His tail wagged with enthusiasm Emma hadn't seen in days. His entire body language shifted from protective alertness to eager anticipation. The connection between dog and original handler was undeniable, professional, and completely outside anything the Rodriguez family could provide. But there is an alternative, Agent Hoffman continued. The federal government is prepared to offer your family complete relocation with new identities, new social security numbers, new birth certificates, new employment history. You would disappear completely, and the cartel would eventually stop looking for you. Carmen's voice was barely a whisper. What's the catch? You can't take Ranger with you, Jake said gently. A K-9 officer can't disappear the way a family can. His training, his capabilities, his entire existence is documented in federal databases. More importantly, he's needed. The drug trafficking network that took him is still operating, and Ranger is one of the few assets we have that can identify their methods, their hiding places, their chemical signatures. Emma felt like someone had reached into her chest and squeezed her heart until it stopped beating. So we have to choose between keeping Ranger and staying alive? Agent Hoffman nodded with the clinical precision of someone who dealt in life and death decisions every day. I'm sorry. I know how much you've all sacrificed for him, but the reality is that as long as you have Ranger, you'll never be safe. And as long as Ranger is hidden away in witness protection, he can't do the job he was trained to do, the job that could save thousands of lives by stopping the flow of drugs that killed 15 people in Houston just last week. Miguel stood up abruptly, his construction worker hands clenched into fists. This is insane. We saved his life. We nursed him back to health. We risked everything for him. And now you're telling us we have to give him up so you can use him as a weapon? I'm telling you that Ranger is not a pet, Jake replied, his voice carrying the weight of years of partnership with the dog. He's a sworn officer of the law. He took an oath, just like I did. He has a duty to serve and protect that goes beyond any personal attachments. As if responding to his name, Ranger approached Jake and sat in the perfect heel position that had been drilled into him through months of intensive training. But then he did something that surprised everyone. He looked back at Emma with an expression that seemed to convey both love and apology. Emma burst into tears. Not the quiet crying she had been doing for days, but the kind of deep body shaking, sobs that come from losing something precious that can never be replaced. He doesn't want to leave us either. Can't you see that? He's choosing duty over happiness, just like you're asking us to do. Carmen moved to comfort her daughter, but she was crying too. Miguel turned away, unwilling to let the federal agents see the tears that were streaming down his face. For 3 weeks, Ranger had been more than a rescued dog. He had been a symbol of their family's capacity for love, courage, and sacrifice. He had been proof that doing the right thing mattered, that risking everything for someone else's life was worthwhile. Now they were being told that the right thing was to let him go. Agent Hoffman pulled out a tablet and began showing them photographs of their new life options. Phoenix, Arizona; Denver, Colorado; Portland, Oregon. All cities with established witness protection infrastructure. Miguel, your construction skills will transfer easily. Carmen, there are nursing positions available in all 3 locations. Emma, you'll be able to finish middle school and high school with a completely clean slate. But Emma wasn't looking at the photographs. She was looking at Ranger, who had moved to sit beside her chair in the exact position he had adopted that first night in the veterinary clinic, when they weren't sure he would survive until morning. What happens to him if we say no? Emma asked quietly. Jake's expression was pained but honest. If you refuse relocation, the federal government can't continue to provide protection. You'll be on your own against a cartel that has already proven they can find you anywhere. Ranger will become a target again, and so will all of you. And if we say yes, Ranger returns to active duty with the Houston Police Department. He'll be partnered with me again, and will continue the work that made him a target in the first place. It's dangerous work, but it's the work he was born to do. Emma looked into Ranger's intelligent eyes and saw something that broke her heart completely. The dog was waiting for her permission to leave. Despite his training, despite his duty, despite his obvious bond with Jake, Ranger would stay with the Rodriguez family if they asked him to. He would choose love over duty, even if it meant death for all of them. The choice wasn't really about Ranger at all. The choice was about what kind of people the Rodriguez family wanted to be. A kind who put their own happiness above the greater good, or the kind who understood that sometimes loving someone meant letting them go. Emma wiped her tears and stood up with a dignity that surprised everyone in the room. When do we leave? Agent Hoffman checked her watch. We can have you processed and relocated within 48 hours. And Ranger? Jake's voice was gentle, but firm. I'll take him home tonight, back where he belongs. Emma knelt beside Ranger one final time and wrapped her arms around his powerful neck. The dog stood perfectly still, allowing her to hold him as long as she needed to. You're a hero, she whispered into his fur. You've always been a hero. Now go save the world. When she finally released him, Ranger licked her face once, a gentle, loving goodbye that would stay with her for the rest of her life. Then he walked to Jake's side and sat at attention, ready to return to duty. As they prepared to leave the safe house forever, Emma realized that loving Ranger had taught her something invaluable about sacrifice, duty, and the difference between what we want and what the world needs from us. She would carry that lesson with her to whatever new life awaited them. But first, she had to say goodbye to the best friend she would ever have. 3 months after the Rodriguez family had disappeared into witness protection, Officer Jake Martinez received a phone call that would change everything. The voice on the other end belonged to Detective Maria Santos, and her words carried the weight of an opportunity that might never come again. We found him, Jake. We found Carlos Mendoza. Carlos Mendoza was the ghost who had haunted their investigation for over a year, the cartel leader responsible for Ranger's theft, torture, and attempted murder. He was the architect of a drug distribution network that had flooded Texas with cocaine and fentanyl, killing hundreds and destroying thousands of families. Most importantly, he was the man who had ordered the attacks on the Rodriguez family, turning innocent Good Samaritans into targets simply because they had shown compassion to a suffering animal. Where Jake asked, though he was already reaching for his tactical gear. Houston, Memorial City area. We have intelligence that he's personally overseeing a major shipment. Tonight, $20 million worth of pure cocaine coming in through the port. But Jake, Santos paused, her voice heavy with implication. Our sources say he's planning to disappear after this shipment. New identity, new country, unlimited resources. If we don't get him tonight, we'll never get another chance. Jake looked across the Houston Police Department's K-9 facility at Ranger, who was conducting a routine narcotics search of a seized vehicle. In the 3 months since his return to active duty, the German Shepherd had performed flawlessly, his skills sharper than ever despite the trauma he had endured. But Jake could see something in the dog's eyes during quiet moments. A distant quality that suggested Ranger was thinking about a 12-year-old girl who used to read to him during his recovery. What's the plan? Jake asked, though he already knew the answer would be dangerous. Mendoza is paranoid about electronic surveillance, so he conducts his major deals in person. We have an undercover operation set up. Agent Rebecca Chun is posing as a buyer representing a West Coast distribution network. The meet is scheduled for 10 p.m. at an abandoned warehouse complex near the port. Jake checked his watch. 6:30 p.m. That's cutting it close for preparation. It gets more complicated, Santos continued. Mendoza specifically requested that the location be swept for K-9 units before he arrives. He's terrified of police dogs after what happened with Ranger. He thinks having a dog present means automatic detection of his product. So how do we get Ranger inside? We don't. At least, not officially. Santos paused again, and Jake could hear the wheels turning in her mind. But what if Ranger wasn't there as a police dog? What if he was there as ... bait? The plan that Detective Santos outlined was audacious, dangerous, and probably insane. It was also the only chance they would ever have to bring down the man who had caused so much pain to so many people. Agent Chun would conduct the drug buy as planned, but hidden in her vehicle would be a tracking device that would lead federal agents to Mendoza's primary distribution center. However, Mendoza was too smart to keep incriminating evidence at the meeting site. The real drugs would be stored elsewhere, and only Ranger's nose could identify the chemical signatures that would lead them to the main stash. The twist was that Ranger would be there not as a police dog, but as Agent Chun's pet, a cover story that would allow him to get close enough to Mendoza to identify the specific chemical markers they needed to track down the cartel's entire operation. It's insane, Jake said, but he was already running through the tactical possibilities in his mind. It's also our only shot, Santos replied. But Jake, there's something else you need to know. We have intelligence that Mendoza has specifically put a bounty on Ranger's head. $500,000 to anyone who can prove the dog is dead. If he recognizes Ranger. Jake didn't need her to finish the sentence. If Mendoza recognized Ranger, the dog would be killed on the spot, along with anyone trying to protect him. But there was another factor that Santos didn't know about, something that Jake had been keeping to himself for the past 3 months. Through unofficial channels, he had been sending updates about Ranger's progress to a secure email address that Agent Hoffman had provided. Updates that were being forwarded to a family living under assumed names in Denver, Colorado. Jake knew that Emma Rodriguez, now calling herself Emma Martinez in her new life, read every word about Ranger's accomplishments. He knew that she had asked Agent Hoffman multiple times if there was any way she could help with Ranger's missions. He knew that a 12-year-old girl was living with the daily heartbreak of having given up the best friend she had ever had. And he also knew something that would have terrified Detective Santos. Emma had been training. Not formally, not officially, but with the dedication of someone who understood that knowledge could be the difference between life and death. She had been studying everything she could find about canine handling, drug detection, and police tactics. She had been preparing herself for a day that everyone told her would never come. That day had arrived. Jake made a decision that violated every protocol in the book. He called Agent Hoffman and asked her to arrange for Emma Rodriguez to be brought to Houston immediately. "Are you out of your mind?" Hoffman's voice crackled through the secure phone line. "She's a 13-year-old girl in witness protection. We cannot expose her to... She's the only person Ranger trusts completely besides me," Jake interrupted. "And if this operation goes wrong, if Mendoza recognizes Ranger despite our cover story, we're going to need someone who can handle that dog under extreme stress. Someone he would die to protect." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly a minute before Hoffman spoke again. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Emma comes to Houston as Agent Chun's niece. A girl traveling with her aunt. And her aunt's dog. Completely innocent, completely believable, and positioned to handle Ranger if everything goes to hell. And if the operation is compromised? If Mendoza figures out who Ranger is and who Emma is?" Jake's voice was steady, despite the magnitude of what he was suggesting. "Then we make our stand, all of us together." 6 hours later, Emma Rodriguez stepped off a federal transport plane at a private airfield outside Houston. She had grown taller in the 3 months since witness protection, and her face had taken on a maturity that came from understanding loss at a deeper level than most adults ever would. But when she saw Ranger waiting on the tarmac with Jake, her composure cracked completely. The reunion was everything Jake had hoped it would be, and everything he had feared it might be. Ranger's transformation was immediate and total, from professional police dog to devoted companion in the space of a heartbeat. His tail wagged with an enthusiasm that threatened to knock Emma over, and his entire body seemed to vibrate with joy at seeing the girl who had saved his life. "He's been waiting for you," Jake said quietly, as Emma knelt to embrace the dog she had given up to save both their lives. "I've been waiting for him too," Emma replied, her voice muffled by Ranger's thick fur. "I've been training, learning everything I could. I knew someday we'd work together again." Jake felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the truth. Emma Rodriguez wasn't just Ranger's former caretaker anymore. She had become something far more dangerous and far more valuable. She had become Ranger's true partner. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, though he already knew the answer from the determination in her young eyes. "We've been ready since the day we found each other," Emma replied, standing up with Ranger at perfect heel beside her. "Let's go catch the bad guy." As they drove through the Houston night toward what would either be the end of Carlos Mendoza's reign of terror or the last mission any of them would ever undertake, Jake realized that some bonds transcended training, protocol, and common sense. Some partnerships were forged in moments of life and death and could never be broken by distance, time, or federal bureaucracy. Tonight, they would discover just how strong those bonds really were. The abandoned warehouse district near Houston's port felt like a graveyard of broken dreams and failed businesses. Rusted shipping containers created a maze of shadows where anyone could hide, and the constant sound of distant traffic from the sea highway masked the careful movements of federal agents positioning themselves for what would either be the most successful drug bust in Texas history or a catastrophic failure that would haunt law enforcement for years to come. Emma crouched beside Agent Rebecca Chun's rental car, her heart pounding so hard she was certain everyone within a mile radius could hear it. Ranger lay beside her in perfect camouflage position, his black and tan coat blending seamlessly with the shadows cast by the towering containers. To any observer, they looked exactly like what their cover story claimed: a woman traveling with her teenage niece and the family dog, stopping for a late-night meeting with potential business partners. The reality was far more dangerous. Hidden throughout the warehouse complex, 23 federal agents and local police officers waited for the signal to move. Jake Martinez was positioned on a rooftop 300 yards away with a sniper rifle, ready to provide cover fire if the operation went sideways. Detective Santos coordinated communications from a mobile command center disguised as a food truck parked 6 blocks away, but the most dangerous position belonged to Emma and Ranger, who would be walking directly into the presence of Carlos Mendoza, man who had ordered the torture and attempted murder of the dog, now lying trustingly beside her. "Remember," Agent Shun whispered, checking her concealed recording equipment one final time, "you're my niece visiting from Denver. You're here because I couldn't find a babysitter, and you brought your dog because you're homesick. Stay close to me, keep Ranger calm, and if anything goes wrong, I know," Emma interrupted quietly. "Get to the extraction point and wait for backup." But they both knew that if things went wrong in the presence of Carlos Mendoza, there might not be time for extraction protocols. At exactly 10:47 p.m., 3 black SUVs rolled into the warehouse complex with the predatory grace of sharks, entering their hunting territory. Emma watched through the car's tinted windows as armed men emerged from each vehicle, their movements professional and coordinated. These weren't street-level dealers or low-ranking cartel members. These were elite soldiers in a drug war that had claimed thousands of lives. Carlos Mendoza emerged from the middle SUV like a man who owned the world and everyone in it. He was smaller than Emma had expected, perhaps 5'8" and slender, but he carried himself with the absolute confidence of someone who had never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved with money or violence. His expensive suit was perfectly tailored, his silver hair immaculately styled, and his dark eyes missed nothing as they surveyed the meeting location. Ranger's reaction was immediate and terrifying. The dog went rigid, every muscle in his powerful body coiling with barely contained fury. A low growl rumbled deep in his chest, not the warning growl Emma had heard before, but something primal and murderous. Ranger recognized the scent of the man who had ordered his torture, and every instinct the dog possessed screamed for revenge. "Easy, boy," Emma whispered, placing her hand on Ranger's head in the calming gesture she had practiced thousands of times. "Not yet. We have to be smart about this." Agent Shun stepped out of the car with the casual confidence of someone conducting routine business, her demeanor giving no hint of the federal agents surrounding the warehouse complex. "Mr. Gonzalez," she called out, using Mendoza's cover name. "Thank you for agreeing to meet on such short notice." Mendoza's smile was shark-like and completely without warmth. "Ms. Chun, I trust your journey from California was productive?" His eyes swept over Agent Shun's car, taking in every detail, every possible threat. When his gaze settled on Emma and Ranger, his expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "My niece," Agent Shun explained smoothly. "She's visiting from Denver, and I couldn't leave her alone in the hotel. The dog is hers. She gets anxious when they're separated." For several heartbeats, Mendoza stared at Ranger with an intensity that made Emma's blood run cold. She could see recognition flickering in his eyes, could see him trying to place where he had seen this particular German Shepherd before. Ranger stared back with equal intensity, his training warring with his desire for vengeance. "Beautiful animal," Mendoza said finally, his voice carrying undertones that suggested anything but admiration. "German Shepherds are memorable dogs. Very distinctive markings." Emma felt sweat beading on her forehead, despite the cool night air. Mendoza suspected something, but he hadn't made the full connection yet. The question was whether they could complete the mission before his suspicions crystallized into certainty. The drug deal proceeded with a careful choreography of professional criminals, conducting high-stakes business. Agent Shun examined samples, while Mendoza's men checked for electronic surveillance. Money changed hands, coded phrases were exchanged, and the entire time, Emma kept one hand on Ranger's head, feeling the coiled tension in his muscles. That's when everything went catastrophically wrong. One of Mendoza's lieutenants, a scarred man with prison tattoos covering his arms, approached Agent Chun's car to inspect it for tracking devices. As he passed within 3 feet of Ranger, the dog's scent memory triggered an explosive reaction. This man had been present during Ranger's torture sessions. This man had participated in the systematic abuse that had nearly killed him. Ranger erupted from his concealed position like a guided missile. His 90 pounds of muscle and training focused entirely on the man who had caused him so much pain. The attack was swift, brutal, and completely beyond Emma's ability to control. "It's him!" Mendoza screamed, his carefully maintained composure shattering as he finally made the connection. "That's the police dog! Kill them all!" Gunfire erupted from multiple directions as Mendoza's men opened fire on Agent Chun's position. Emma threw herself behind the car as bullets shattered windows and punctured metal, her training taking over despite her terror. Agent Chun was already on her radio, calling for immediate backup, but the nearest agents were still minutes away. Ranger had taken down his primary target, but was now facing 3 armed men who were trying to get clear shots at him. The dog moved with the fluid grace of a predator in his element, using the maze of shipping containers to break line of sight and confuse his attackers. Emma saw Mendoza drawing a silver pistol from inside his jacket, saw him taking aim at Rangers. Exposed flank, saw the moment when the cartel leader's finger began to tighten on the trigger. She didn't think. She didn't hesitate. She didn't consider the consequences or calculate the odds of survival. Emma Rodriguez, aged 13, threw herself between Carlos Mendoza's gun and the dog who had saved her family's life. The bullet meant for Ranger caught Emma in the shoulder, spinning her around and sending her crashing into a stack of wooden pallets. Pain exploded through her body like liquid fire, but she could see that her sacrifice had achieved its purpose. Ranger was unharmed and moving to protect her with the same ferocity he had once shown in protecting her family. Jake Martinez's sniper rifle spoke from 300 yards away, and Mendoza dropped like a stone, the silver pistol spinning away into the darkness. Federal agents swarmed the warehouse complex from every direction, their tactical lights cutting through the night like searchlights, hunting for survivors. But Emma was already losing consciousness, her vision blurring as shock began to set in. The last thing she saw was Ranger's face looking down at her, his intelligent eyes filled with what could only be described as profound gratitude and love. The last thing she heard was Jake's voice on the radio. "Officer down. We need medical assistance immediately." 6 months later, a bronze statue was unveiled in Memorial Park in Houston. The inscription read, "Officer Ranger, Badge K9 to 47, in memory of a hero who served with honor, courage, and unwavering loyalty. His sacrifice saved countless lives and reminded us that heroism comes in many forms." Emma Rodriguez, her left arm still in a sling from surgery to repair the bullet damage, pulled the cord that revealed the memorial. The crowd that had gathered for the ceremony included police officers, federal agents, city officials, and hundreds of ordinary citizens whose lives had been touched by Ranger's story. But the most important attendees were Miguel and Carmen Rodriguez, who had been allowed to leave witness protection for this one day to honor the dog who had changed their lives forever. They stood beside their daughter, tears streaming down their faces as they remembered the German shepherd, who had taught them that sometimes the greatest act of love is sacrifice. Agent Hoffman approached the family after the ceremony, carrying a small German shepherd puppy whose markings were remarkably similar to Ranger's. "Her name is Hope," Hoffman said quietly. "She's Ranger's daughter, born just before his final mission. The Houston Police Department has decided she should be raised by the family that understood her father better than anyone. Emma knelt carefully, mindful of her healing shoulder, and the puppy immediately crawled into her lap with the same trusting nature her father had shown on that stormy night when they first found each other. "Hello, Ho," Emma whispered. "I have so many stories to tell you about your dad." Jake Martinez, now promoted to sergeant and head of the K-9 unit, watched from a distance as the Rodriguez family began the process of healing. Rangers' final mission had been a complete success. Mendoza's entire organization had been dismantled. 23 cartel members were in federal prison, and millions of dollars worth of drugs had been removed from the streets. But more importantly, Rangers' story had inspired a new generation of K-9 officers and handlers. The Ranger Foundation, established by the Rodriguez family, had already rescued and retrained 17 former police dogs, placing them with families of fallen officers who needed both protection and companionship. As the sun set over Houston and the memorial ceremony concluded, Emma looked up at the bronze statue of the dog who had saved her family and then saved countless others. "Thank you," she whispered, and somehow she was certain he could hear her. Hope yipped softly in her arms, as if agreeing that some bonds transcend life and death, that some heroism echoes through generations, and that sometimes the greatest victories come not from violence, but from the simple decision to do what's right, no matter the cost. Ranger's legacy would live on in every life saved, every family protected, and every act of courage inspired by his story. Heroes never really. They just pass their strength to those brave enough to carry it forward.